Please be standing for the Chairman of Thanet District Council.
Thank you. Please be seated. Good evening, members and officers of the Council, members of the press and public. I welcome you to this Council meeting, Thursday, 6th of December 2018. Housekeeping. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs, either through the security doors to my right or opposite the lifts in the foyer. Please do not use the lifts. Please assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. The proceedings of this meeting will be recorded and subsequently broadcast on the internet. I would advise that if filming takes place, anyone in attendance in the public areas may have their image captured. I urge anyone filming proceedings to avoid filming members of the public, particularly if there are children present. Does anyone intend to film the meeting this evening? Thank you. Any member of the public who objects to the possibility of being filmed may wish to take this opportunity to leave the meeting. Any filming or recording will not be permitted for any item of business where exempt or confidential information is considered following the exclusion of the press and public from the meeting. Can I ask everyone present to please ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive phone calls in the chamber whilst this meeting is in progress. Agenda item 1 is apologies for absence. I've received apologies from absence from Councillors Bainbridge, Curran, Dixon, Evans and Messenger. Are there any other apologies for absence? Councillor Fairbrass.
Councillors Wells and Connor.
Thank you.
Done that, yeah.
Done that. Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Piper.
Sorry, Councillor Piper. I'll move my position. I couldn't see your arm there for a minute.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor John Dennis, Councillor Trevor Shonk, Councillor Roy Potts and Councillor Bertie Braidwood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do I assume they didn't want my mince pies and drinks afterwards?
They said I could have them, Chairman.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, minutes of previous meeting held on the 11th and 15th October. I move that the minutes of the meetings of the Council held on the 11th and 15th of October 2018 be approved and signed as a correct record. Would the Vice Chairman please second?
I second that, Chair.
Thank you. Do members agree? Thank you. Agenda item 3, minutes of the extraordinary meeting held on the 6th of November 2018. I move that the minutes of the extraordinary meeting of the Council held on the 6th of November 2018 be approved and signed as a correct record. Once again, would the Vice Chairman please second?
Second, Chair.
Do members agree? Agree. Thank you. Agenda item 4, announcements. Members, can we take a moment to acknowledge the excellent conduct of one of our civil enforcement officers for his professional response to a very challenging situation. Dean remained calm and professional while under pressure, and tonight he is recognised for his excellent conduct, and our thanks go to Dean, who this evening is being presented with an acknowledging excellence certificate in appreciation for his response. So, I'm standing, you don't need to stand. Thank you, members. Another announcement. I am sure members will join me in congratulating Tom Davis, our Empty Homes officer, who has won the Rising Star Award at this year's Empty Homes Awards. This is a national award that recognises new empty homes practitioners who have made significant contributions over a short period of time. Once again, I'd like you to give your appreciation, and our thanks go to Tom. Thank you. One more announcement to make. I'd like to take this opportunity to invite all Thanet District Councillors for a Christmas drink and mince pies in the business suite on the first floor after this meeting. I very much hope that you will be able to attend and join me in a pre-festivity drink and mince pie. I can assure you that all of the mince pies are well within their eat-by date, so no problems in that direction. Agenda item 5, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Agenda item 6, petitions. 2 petitions have been received in accordance with Council Procedure Rule number 12. Agenda item 6A is a petition regarding the Margate Museum and the Mayor's Parlour. A petition containing 94 valid signatures has been received by the Council. I am pleased to welcome Mr. Smith-Stewart to the meeting. Could you please make your way to the top table? Thank you, Mr. Smith-Stewart. You now have 3 minutes to speak.
I'll speak as fast as I can, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everybody. A few of you members probably know me for a number of years, working hard in Margate anyway. The petition states asking the council to not to sell the museum and the town hall. I think the town hall basically is the home of all our mayors, one by the other. I don't know what the position is at the moment, but perhaps if somebody could give me an idea of what's going on. I'm not very good at speaking, but I'm a bit painful tonight, but not to worry. Anyway, I do hope the council, all of you, decide it's your home, whoever comes mayor next time in Margate, and of course, Margate is up and coming with visitors. The visitor numbers are going up. The volunteers are doing a fantastic job, and perhaps money can be found in other ways. Thank you. Was that long enough?
Thank you, Mr. Smith-Stewart. I'm sure we all agree with the contents of your speech. Can I confirm that in accordance with the Council petition scheme, the petition will be referred to Cabinet without debate for a report to the Council within the next 3 ordinary meetings? Thank you. Agenda item 6B is a petition regarding the Port of Ramsgate, a petition containing 1,119 valid signatures and an e-petition containing 154 valid signatures has been received by the Council. I am pleased to welcome Mr. Coombs to the meeting. Could you please make your way to the top table? Mr. Coombs, as your petition contained over 1,000 signatures, you have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you very much. Merry Christmas. The panto season is upon us. Ooh, and a comedy chair. My name is Steve Coombs, and I'm chair of the Ramsgate Action Group. Now, I'm sure many of you might be surprised to see me speaking here tonight, as TDC says I'm vexatious and unreasonable complainant.
Can we just keep to the point of the petition, Mr. Coombs, please?
I'm about to, Mr. Chair. So let's assume, for the sake of argument, that I really am the harassing, stalking, death threatener of their imagination. Now, ask yourself...
Mr. Coombs, we're drifting. Can you just present the basis of the petition, please? We don't want any comments regarding anything that's gone...
That's not a comment from
Well,
me, that's a comment from the council.
You can either use
Sorry.
the time productively
Right.
or not.
Now, ask yourself one very simple question. Who do you trust more to give you accurate information about the port? Me or TDC? When you want to know whether seaborne freight can pass due diligence and compliance, who do you listen to? Me or TDC?
Are we talking about the basis of the petition?
The basis of the petition...
This is
Mr.
all
Chair,
this
the basis
wording...
of the petition is we have no confidence in the council's operation of the port. If I cannot make statements to explain why we have no confidence in the council's operation of the port, I don't think you're allowing me to speak to the prayer of the petition.
I will allow you to speak as long as we keep it factual and we don't drift off too far. Thank you.
Who told you seaborne freight were capitalised at £66? Who told you they had no employees, no investors, no credible business plan, and no ships? RAG did. On Brexit resilience, who gave you a detailed, expert and authoritative analysis with diagrams and charts as to why 24 sailings a day could never work, even with a £35 million dredge? We did. And it came from ex-ferry captains and freight logistics experts. So you don't have to, I don't have to persuade you, you don't have any confidence in the council's operations of the port. You already know that. The question is, what do you intend to do about it? Now, the problem is, as soon as I finish speaking, the petition will be remitted to Cabinet, and maybe in 3 or 4 meetings' time, it will come back to you. If you put up with that, you will commit the port to another 6 months of losses. Sorry, booked losses. About £1 million. Following on from the £2 million that has been lost since negotiations began with Seaborne Freight last November, which followed on from the £2 million per year of booked losses, whilst discussions were held with a host of other ferry companies that never materialised. 5 years of this nonsense and an accumulated deficit of over £21 million. In the meantime, TDC is cutting services by over £1 million a year. So RAG believes that you, as councillors, have a duty to your voters to put a stop to this, to insist on an open, transparent, rational and independent review of the port, where all the options are put on the table and where the advantages and disadvantages are laid out in plain English, in clear numbers for all to see. And I expect RAG to absolutely hate some of those options. But if you've got a case, you can make it. Now, at a stretch, the mechanism for this independent review could be the new Port Working Party, but not if it's just serviced by the CMT. But maybe if it was able to receive outside submissions, if it had access to frank, expert and authoritative independent opinion and advice, it might just be fit for purpose. So, ladies and gentlemen of the Council, on behalf of every council taxpayer in the district, I commend to you this prayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coombs. Well done, well rehearsed. I think you had another 6 seconds there, but thank you very much. As the petition relates to an issue for which the Executive Cabinet has responsibility, it will be referred by Council to Cabinet. Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
This petition, I think, has more than 1,000 signatures. 1.2. If a petition contains more than 1,000 signatures, Council can debate the petition unless it falls into a category of exception as detailed paragraph A and B of 1.6 of the scheme. In this case, paragraph B would be appropriate, namely, so it goes on about the 1,000 signatures. So I'm feeling that we should be allowed to debate this, and I actually think that's a very good recommendation of having an independent body look at the issue, because maybe some of us are too close to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. You're absolutely right. Councillor Piper and then Councillor Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to ask for some clarity, please, on the paragraph 3.1 on page 19. It says under paragraph 1.6 brackets B of the Council's petition scheme, if the petition with 1,000 or more signatures relates to an issue for which the Executive brackets Cabinet has responsibility, it may, following presentation, be referred to Council by Council to Cabinet without debate. Could you please clarify, it may or it will? Thank you, Chair.
The answer is it may, and therefore Council could debate it instead if it wishes.
Councillor Campbell?
Point made, Chair.
Thank you. Does Council wish to debate? Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a quick one. There has been some difficulty, it's been acknowledged, in various members receiving communications from Mr. Coombs. Given that he has been given permission to address this Council this evening, can we be assured that all other means of contact between him and elected members will be reopened on a permanent basis? Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chairman. I did actually try to move that we do debate it this evening and not refer it straight to Cabinet. It's too important an issue not to be discussed in open forum. And I personally, I haven't discussed it with the group here, but I personally feel that an independent body looking at everything to do with the port would be a good idea and a way forward. And maybe even, and this could be something decided by Cabinet later, but an independent group from another council to look at this. Because the rumours and the conversations that are outside this council are again dragging us into even more discredit outside. And I think it's important that a totally independent group look at this, not officers from here, not members from here, but somebody independent of us from another council. That's what I'd like to move. Thank you.
Councillor Campbell, do you want to come back before
Well, I was going to second the fact that we debate it this evening, yes? So if that was a proposal from Councillor Johnson that we debate this particular issue this evening, then I actually second that proposal.
Thank you. That's quite all right, Councillor Campbell. Right. We'll debate it. Councillor Bayford.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Well, I don't really want to get into too much comment about Mr. Coombs and the way he's behaved over recent times. I think that most people have seen some of the posts that he's put up, and I think a lot of them are fairly despicable, and I think that's a bit unfortunate. There's a couple of points I'd like to make. I mean, first, it's absolutely right that I have proposed and informed the proposed members of a Port and Harbour working party. I've chosen councillors who both live in Ramsgate and represent Ramsgate wards, democratically elected people that I think are fit to actually be on that committee. And its first meeting, I don't know if the date's been fixed. I mean, they were looking to get diaries together. And the first duty of that committee will be to determine its terms of reference. And then we can consider all sorts of things. I would, just a little bit though, like to question the mandate that Mr Coombs has. He made no mention of the petition, really. He talked about RAG. I'm not sure how many members RAG has got, but the petition had 1,273 signatures on it. Now, if we were to be charitable and assume that all of those came from Ramsgate, that represents 3% of the population of Ramsgate, which I don't think is much of a mandate. A very cursory glance at the petition today showed me that a significant number, very significant number of the signatures were people not living in Ramsgate. But let's be charitable again and assume that they live in Thanet. That means the mandate is less than 1% of the residents of Thanet. But what did interest me was the fact that it does appear that there is concern about the running of our port in Dover, Maidstone, Herne Bay, Deal, Canterbury, Whitstable, Tonbridge, Dartford, Hemel Hempstead, they're very worried about the port in Hemel Hempstead, Reigate, Woodford Green, Horsham, Ipswich, Gillingham, Twickenham, Sutton Coldfield, Newport and Brixton. So, in deference to those people, we will actually hold our committee meetings and we will consider the future of the port. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bayford. Councillor Constantine.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm hoping you won't cut me off too soon tonight. Can I just say, I think it's unfortunate when we move to a position in this chamber where we talk about members of the public that spend their time bringing matters to our attention. And regardless, Councillor Bayford, of your subjective analysis of Steve Coombs and RAG's petition, I think it's quite wrong to say some of the things that you've said, actually, because the points that have been raised by Steve Coombs tonight and by RAG, I'm a resident in Ramsgate and I've been for a number of years. I can tell you from living there and from being the county councillor there, that these issues are very live, actually. We have an asset that is losing money. We have an asset that people can see isn't doing what it should be doing. We have an asset that isn't making any money. And we have an asset that is losing money. And people are, frankly, scratching their heads and wondering what the heck their local council and councillors are up to. So I think we do need to have an urgent look at the port. This has been going on for so long. I think we are, and forgive the pun, I think we're all out of our depth. And I think we do need an independent set of eyes, independent bodies looking at this. And Councillor Bayford, please don't kick this down the road. This has been going on for too long. And the reason I ask you not to kick this down the road and kick it into the long grass and obscure it for a number of months coming forward is because the needs in our community are skyrocketing. And it's our job, I say this all the time in this chamber, it's our job as local councillors to attempt to meet the needs of our residents, and that's what we should be doing. So I'm proposing, actually, that this panel is comprised of external experts and we give them some proper, independent, robust advice.
Thank you, Councillor Constantine. Councillor Campbell, did I see your hand up quickly and then I'll
Yes, you did, Chair. Thank you very
count.
much. Just to inform those gathered here and the petitioner that Councillor Bayford is quite right. There has been a meeting date set for the working group. It is the 12th of this month. I'm on it. It will not be kicked into the long grass. I think Councillor Bayford will know and understand that when he asked me to join this group, that I was not going to accede to any kicking in the long grass. We will form our terms of reference. I do believe that external experts may have a place to play in this particular working group, but we will on the 12th determine that from the number of people who have been invited. Action now eventually has been taken and is being taken. I think this is in part, almost totally in part, for the residents of my ward, including RAG, actually causing let's say, this issue to rise above the waters. I will report back. It's not a secret working party. The results of it will not be a secret working party, and I will keep members informed as to the outcome of the working party. Thank you, Chair.
I think the answer is exercising their enthusiasm. Councillor Bayford.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Responding to Councillor Constantine, I seriously resent the remarks that you made about me. The Chief Executive will be able to confirm that the Friday after I became leader of this council, which I remember because it was the first day of the Beast for the East, so I skated down the road to get into this council, and actually Chief Executive made the effort to come in too. We had a discussion about the things that were on my list of priorities. Number one was the local plan. Number two, I think the Chief can confirm, was the port. And I made it absolutely clear that the situation that pertained to the port could not go on. And I've said that right at the beginning, and it really does get my goat that I'm being pilloried, particularly by Mr Coombs, all the time for doing nothing about it. That's not true, but things do take a certain amount of time. There's a lot of stuff going on in the background here. The committee will be brought up to speed on that. So please, Councillor Constantine, don't accuse me of kicking the can down the road. Never have done, never will do. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I was the fortunate person in 2008 to sit on a working party very similar to what has been described by Councillor Campbell. It was chaired by Councillor Bayford. I was busy, I was going to work, and actually I had quite a serious illness that year. But I got taxis over to Ramsgate for those meetings, and talk about kicking into the long grass. We never achieved anything. I read everything, as I always do, about municipal ports. I learned everything that I needed to know, and we never had a final outcome. We had officers coming, and then it just suddenly died a death. What mortifies me, having been a leader in here in 2014, 2015, is that there may have been issues that I knew nothing about as a leader, and we have to be honest with each other. If I wasn't given all the information as a leader, and I was pretty good about asking questions, I want someone to find out what happened in my time that I wasn't told about. And I won't shy away from it, and I don't think any leader should. I think it's fine if you've set up a working party, which you did, and that's good, but I've been on one that was kicked into the long grass 10 years ago. Please don't do it again. Please look to an independent, expert body to do this, because otherwise we're all wasting our time, and my reputation and every leader's reputation before depends on us getting this right. And the officers who were supposed to give us all our advice weren't telling me about 2 million a year losses. The other point that needs to be made is that people who signed this petition from other parts of the country, by its very definition, it's a port, it's a marina. There are people from outside the area who use it. They're probably signing petitions. I had this from a tourism point of view, where we were accused of false signatures. The people who were in hotels signing, saying through lack of lavatories many years ago. And they weren't false signatures. There were signatures of people who saw the problems we had. Please look at this. If we can go back to Cabinet to do it properly and get another council to help us, then we can all say we did our best. No problem with a working party on other basics. But I wasn't told everything when I was the leader, and I will admit to that, because I did my best to find the truth every time, but I didn't always get the full facts. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Roseszki and Councillor Martin. Did you want to respond quickly? But Councillor Bayford.
A couple of points there. First of all, I didn't suggest they were bogus signatures at all. What I suggested were they were from strange parts of the country. And the other thing I could have said was that, in my experience, petitions can be an unreliable bellwether of public opinion. There was some years ago a major issue in my ward, absolutely divided the ward, and it was a black and white issue. People were either totally for it, totally against it. Each side got up a petition, quite successful petitions. When they were examined, it turned out that quite a significant proportion of people had signed both petitions. Now, people do sign petitions for all sorts of reasons, sometimes because they're very, very committed to the cause, sometimes because it's the quickest way to get rid of somebody, sometimes because they haven't been told quite what it's about and haven't read the bit at the top. So it is a bit unreliable, I do think, where that's concerned. Going back to and I was suggesting they're bogus people, I'm just suggesting that they might not have been particularly relevant to the issue that we're talking about here. The other thing is, I remember the working parties back in those days. I also remember that we had some absolutely interminable, torturous meetings over at the port office where we got mired in ways and setting up harbour boards and how they were going to be set up and whatever, and we couldn't reach any decision. Basically, the meetings were going nowhere, which is why they didn't continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Roseszki.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick thing. I welcome the fact that the Council seem to agree that we should debate this issue, but whether tonight would be the right time, I'm not so sure. I feel that as a conscientious councillor, I would need a bit more time to be able to gather the information from various sources and places, to be able to come to this Council and actually debate it properly. And therefore would like to move that we don't actually debate it tonight, but we do set a time and date to debate it. Thank you.
I was under the impression we were debating it, Councillor Rosecki, but we're looking. I think the proposal has already been discussed. Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much, Chair. There is a word that I would like to bring into this chamber, because it's a word which I think we all need to acknowledge and perhaps own, and that is regeneration. It is a word that was used a lot nearly 4 years ago by various candidates for Parliament, and it certainly is a word which has been carried forward within the Regeneration Alliance. The port and harbour, for me, very much come within that concept that we need a plan, we need a vision, we need imagination, which is economically viable and which can be repeated in other coastal areas, because this is not just an issue for us, it is also a national issue. I also want to record my appreciation to Mr. Coombs for his excellent research. We should be very welcoming to a member of our community who is able and capable of doing that level of research, and it's not something that I take for granted, and I really want to acknowledge that and to thank him. What do we do with that research? It is possible that there is a working group. It is my ward, Central Harbour, but I know nothing about a working group. But that may be because I haven't done my homework or read my emails. I would like to know more about it. We need it, and I would like to encourage this chamber to embrace it and to look at the losses. Why all those losses? And how can we stop them? And how can we actually reverse the fortunes of the port and harbour with imagination and with something, with a plan that is economically viable, robust and abundant? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Councillor Fenner.
Thank you, Chair. We know that a working group has been set up which includes some of the members from Ramsgate. From the debate so far, there is a wish that some independent advice is brought about to this debate. I was wondering if a suggestion could be that this council requests that the working party that is set up also includes some independent advisors.
I think the leader's already indicated that that may be the case once the working party gets up and running.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just come back on that? You've just said it. It may include. I think that really this council could actually request that in the terms of a working party that there are some advisors.
I think we can put forward a suggestion, and I think this council can decide whether that suggestion's put forward. I think the nub of the suggestion has already been discussed, and I'm sure will be taken on board, or has been taken on board, by members of the working party that are in the chamber with us this evening. So can I suggest that that is the case, and do members agree? In that case, as I said before, the petition will go before the Executive Committee, and obviously the working party will have input into the outcome, and I'm sure and hope that this council will be given regular updates on where we're going, how we're going, and some of the work, particularly once they decide on their terms of reference. Thank you. Agenda item 7 is questions from the press and public. 2 questions have been received from members of the public in accordance with Council Procedure Rule number 13. Please note that only the questioner and the respondent are permitted to speak on the question, and that if the questioner is not present at this meeting, their question cannot be put but will be replied to in writing. Could the questioner please only state the name of the Cabinet member to whom their question is to be put and read out the exact...
Chairman, can you suggest that that is removed, please?
Sorry, can we remove that? Sorry, can we remove that?
Where's security? That's enough.
Sorry.
No. Right, carry on.
I'll start again. Could the questioner please only state the name of the Cabinet member to whom their question is to be put and read out the exact wording of the question that they submitted to the Council? Agenda item 7A, question number 1 from a member of the public regarding River Oak Strategic Partnership DCO application. I'm pleased to welcome Mr Green to the meeting. Could you please make your way to the top table? Mr Green.
Good evening, Councillor Bayford. Highways England, Historic England, Natural England, Public Health England, Kent County Council, Canterbury City Council, many local groups and 1,100 individual Thanet residents have registered concerns regarding River Oak Strategic Partnerships Development Control Order application. Could you detail how the Council has engaged with the applicant to produce a statement of common ground and a local impact report, what issues have been discussed and whether these have been included in a Section 106 agreement?
Thank you, Mr Green. And I welcome an erstwhile previous councillor. I now call upon the leader to respond.
Thanks, Chairman. Thank you for your question, Mr Green. The Council is engaging with the applicant on the planning matters raised in our pre-application letter and relevant representation, both of which have been published on the Council's website and on the Planning Inspectorate's website. These have discussed how the Council and the applicant can work to resolve as many of the issues raised in these documents as possible to inform the Council's local impact report and any statement of common ground produced. There's a decision for the Planning Inspectorate, as the examining authority, whether a Section 106 agreement would be required in addition to a development consent order if the project is granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. And once again, thank you, Mr Green. Nearly a Freudian slip there, wasn't it? Agenda item 7B, question number 2 from a member of the public regarding Ramsgate Port and Harbour. Would members please refer to supplementary agenda number 1? And I'm pleased to welcome Mr Wise to the meeting. Could you please make your way to the top table, Mr Wise?
The leader. Ramsgate Port Harbour is said to have lost circa £20 million since 2010. Will you please list the services, council jobs and grants to organisations such as the Citizens Advice Bureau that have been lost as a result of the council's failure to manage this loss-making TDC infrastructure? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Wise. I call upon the leader to respond.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr Wise, for your question. Ramsgate Port and Harbour has indeed operated at a net deficit or loss since 2010, as you say, in the region of 20 million based on published accounts. The Council Scrutiny Panel has recently investigated in depth the details behind many of the items of expenditure that comprise the port's activities. Since I became leader, I have made it clear that we need to address the future of the port as one of TDC's major assets. The port has suffered financially as a result of losses from Trans-Europa and legal claims related to live animal exports. The entirely legitimate strategy of this council for many years has been to maintain the port in a state of readiness for an operator that could generate significant income for the council. Currently, we continue to actively pursue a contract with a new potential operator, and we hope that this will come to fruition. But there will come a time soon when we have to move to a new strategy for the port, one where we take action to reduce ongoing costs, coupled with a fresh look at long-term options other than continuing to maintain the port in a state of readiness for an operator. It is, I'm afraid, impossible to answer the part of the question related to the services, jobs and grants lost over the last 8 years as a result of the Port and Harbour. I couldn't possibly establish causality, any more than I could argue that, say, job losses are as a direct result of the reductions in government funding over the years. And I'm sure, as a previous financial portfolio holder, you will understand that, Councillor Wise. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. Thank you, Mr. Wise. Keep slipping into that. It's a question of age, I think. Agenda item 8, questions from members of the Council. No questions have been received from members in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 14. Agenda item 9, motions of notice. No motions of notice have been received in accordance with Council Procedure number 3. Agenda item 10, Leader's Report. I call upon the Leader.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased to advise that we submitted our draft local plan to the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government on the 30th of October. This included the draft local plan, the sustainability appraisal and habitats regulation assessment, and statement of consultation together with the representations received at publication stage and the supporting evidence. As well as being available to view online, the documents can also be viewed at the Gateway Plus building in Cecil Street. In addition, paper copies can be viewed at various locations across Thanet. The draft local plan will be examined in public by independent inspectors who have been appointed by the Planning Inspectorate. The Council has also appointed a programme officer for this examination. Part of the process will involve sessions where those invited to attend will have the opportunity to respond to matters raised by the Inspector. Invitation to participate is coordinated through the Planning Inspector and the Programme Officer. I wish to stress this, both of whom are independent from Thanet District Council, but we will keep councillors informed with the dates of these sessions. Returning to a familiar theme, the Port of Ramsgate has been in national news headlines in the last few weeks. This follows reports in Bloomberg and the Financial Times on Sunday that central government is preparing to invest a significant amount of money in the port so it can be used as an alternative route post-Brexit. Thanet Council has been working on re-establishing ferry services at the Port of Ramsgate and is currently still in negotiations with a potential operator, Seabourn Freight, to establish a freight operation between Ramsgate and Ostend. The Council has been keen to re-establish a ferry service since before the vote to leave the European Union. We recognise that Ramsgate could play a role in supporting post-Brexit resilience by offering an alternative route for some cross-channel traffic to ensure at least some movement of goods should there be significant delays in Dover. As part of this, the Council has reviewed the capability of the Port of Ramsgate to provide capacity to support the Brexit position, which, with an investment of 26 million, includes the potential for up to 24 sailings a day, which would create a capacity to divert 3,360 lorry movements per day from Operation Brock on the M20 and M26, significantly reducing pressure from the Port of Dover during peak traffic flows. This would be especially beneficial to the just-in-time production processes and logistics, for example, the chilled food sector. This information has been shared with Government. The Government has not responded to the Council on that basis, but we are aware that Government is having discussions with other parties regarding contingency arrangements. The port is one of the largest municipally owned commercial ports and is the second closest UK port to the continent. The requirement for cross-channel freight volume is expected to increase steadily beyond Brexit, and the Port of Ramsgate can play a significant part in providing additional capacity. This would give increased resilience to the European logistics market and support the flow of traffic across the southeast of England, especially the Thames corridor, and would link into the coming third Thames crossing, diverting traffic east rather than south to Dover and the Channel Tunnel. Changing the subject, I'm pleased to report that the number of people sleeping on our streets has reduced by nearly 50%, from 45 to 23 over the past year. This was established when we took part in the annual Rough Sleeper Count. I'm sure that our recently established RISE team will continue this trend. And on a related point, this year's Thanet Winter Shelter has now opened. Now in its third year, the award-winning shelter opened its doors to continue its work of helping people to find accommodation so that they don't return to the streets. The shelter is run by the Salvation Army with support from the council and local churches. This year, thanks to additional council funding, the shelter is running for an extra month until the end of March 2019. The venue of the shelter moves each night and is also supported by a number of different churches across Thanet. As well as providing at least 20 bed spaces every night, some venues have additional empty spaces, the shelter also provides guests with a hot dinner and breakfast. Again, changing the subject, recently TDC played host to a small group of visitors from Ards and North Down Borough Council, Northern Ireland. The area includes Bangor, a seaside town 13 miles east of Belfast. They were here to find out about the council's role in regeneration in Thanet. As part of this, they took a tour of Cliftonville, visited the Turner Contemporary and Dreamland, were hosted over at Royal Harbour and met the town team in Broadstairs. They were particularly interested in the Turner Contemporary and the part it had played in the cultural-led regeneration of Margate. This visit follows those by Great Yarmouth Borough Council and the House of Lords Select Committee looking into regenerating seaside towns and communities who were here to see what had been achieved in Thanet. Following up on the Select Committee visit, TDC were asked to suggest how government could help in addressing the challenges faced by coastal towns. We attended a workshop with representatives from other seaside areas to explore this further. Amongst the ideas put forward were for funding programmes to be less short-term, enabling projects to be supported longer, for seed funding programmes to be established to encourage private sector investment, and for funding programmes to be focused on supporting coastal communities rather than coastal destinations, i.e. for the benefit of residents, not visitors. We also took the opportunities to ask for policy and funding support linked to the placement of vulnerable children and adults, which, as you well know, is a significant issue in Thanet. Our housing team has produced a guide to housing services in Thanet, which will be delivered to every household in the district. Distribution of the 16-page mailer, which has been produced by Environmental Projects Limited at no cost to TDC and with support from local advertisers, began on the 29th of October. It includes information on all the key services that the housing team provides, as well as details on HMO licensing, empty properties, and our programme of developing affordable homes. And whilst on the subject of housing, it's good to note that TDC has recently brought another 40 homes back into use, and our Empty Homes officer, Tom Davies, has won a Rising Star Award. You heard about that earlier. I'm pleased to announce the launch of a digital parking pilot. This administration is committed to keep working towards a parking offering which meets the expectations of our residents in terms of availability, ease of use and price. Throughout the pilot, we're working with Canterbury City Council, who are presently rolling out digital parking, having already carried out their own pilots. This will enable us to learn from their experience and hopefully avoid some of the teething problems. The system uses automatic number plate recognition technology, which will enable us to offer a number of benefits to users. One of the things residents told us was that they wanted to pay for exactly the time they were parked, rather than by the hour, which led either to people rushing back to meet a deadline or paying for time they didn't use. This can be achieved with APNR. Interestingly, evidence suggests that people park and pay for longer under the new system. There will also be more options for paying. Payment can be made by card, Apple Pay, Android Pay and Auto Pay, rather like the Dart charge, where people can drive in, drive out, and money is automatically taken from their account. And people can also pay by cash. That's in there for you, Councillor Campbell. In terms of benefits to the Council, these include less need for enforcement. In the Canterbury pilot, the number of penalty charge notices went down from 400 to 4. increased revenue due to people staying longer, improved security as there's less cash to handle, and better real-time operational data. Parking is an ongoing issue which affects residents, visitors and businesses, and improving our offer will have far-reaching benefits. In November, I attended a meeting of the Thames Gateway Strategic Group, which was considering its response to the Thames Estuary Commission 2050 Vision Report, which recommended that a robust, locally led review of governance arrangement be undertaken. It was proposed that a Thames Estuary Growth and Prosperity Board be set up, which would be a single voice for the Thames Estuary. It's believed that the estuary needs an ambitious long-term strategic growth plan, together with jointly agreed investment programme for key strategic infrastructure. It's further suggested that there needs to be a structure agreed with government that can be a single point of coordination and escalation for strategically important issues. There also needs to be a clear set of expectations from government about housing numbers, jobs and economic growth. The feeling is that the Thames Estuary could become an area whose identity is as prominent in government thinking as the Northern Powerhouse or the Midlands Engine. Whilst on the subject of growth and infrastructure, I'm pleased to report that the Thanet Parkway project continues to be actively supported by Kent County Council, and it's hoped that funding will be secured by 2019. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Councillor Fairbrass, are you responding in the absence of Councillor Wells? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Leader. It's very good to hear that there's almost a 50% reduction of people sleeping rough on our streets, although it shouldn't make us complacent, as there is such a thin line between those that are able to retain a roof over their heads and those that can't for one reason or another. Well done to those that went out and did the head count. I joined the team last year and found it to be a cold and thought-provoking experience. It's excellent news that we've been able to find some extra funding to allow the winter shelter to remain open for longer this year. As I was involved in the setup of this right from the start, I'm delighted that it's still going 3 years later and continuing to help those in dire need at this time of year. I've seen the Council's admission to the House of Lords Select Committee, and I am disappointed at how Margate-centric it is, with only a couple of mentions in passing for Ramsgate in the whole document. Ramsgate is also in dire need of regeneration, and we must remember that Thanet is much bigger than just Margate. I'd like to say an additional well done to Tom Davis for his Rising Star Award, and hope that we will continue bringing empty properties back into use well into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fairbrass. I don't think there's a need to respond. There was no questions there. Councillor Bayford.
Of course Ramsgate hasn't been forgotten, nor have all the other places in Thanet. Thank you.
He didn't mention the B word, did he? Councillor Piper, can I call upon Councillor Reverend Piper to comment on or ask questions in relationship to the Leader's report? Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I must try and stick to the script. The local plan. Leader, it is of some relief to many people, I'm sure, that the local plan process is moving along. I have been accused by some of grandstanding and playing politics in this chamber, and naturally enough, I strongly reject these claims. However, this is an opportunity that is simply too good to miss. So here goes with the playing politics. On this issue of the local plan, I speak for my whole group when I say that we are proud of the fact that the decisive action we took in January of this year has managed in some way to unblock the logjam which was a long overdue local plan submission. End of politics. We recognise that an extraordinary amount of work has been done by officers and their staff to fulfil our council obligations in that regard. Many might argue that it isn't perfect, but to be fair, very few plans in any walk of life are perfect, but somehow they sometimes seem to work. We are at least leader in the game now, and for the time being, we remain in control of our own affairs. The port and harbour. Leader, as you say, the port has been in the news for many of the wrong reasons of late, and perhaps it is time for a somewhat better outlook. There is, however, a report apparently coming from Belgium that things may not be as far advanced as we're being reported on this side of the water, but ever the optimists, we await further news of a successful development of Ramsgate Port, which is, has been said, a substantial asset in Ramsgate and trust that whatever route is taken, it will be taken for the genuine benefit of the people of Thanet and will provide jobs and economic benefit to local people. The winter shelter, Leader, I think it's right and proper for Councillor Jenny Matterface and Councillor Lynn Fairbrass to make the majority of the comments on this subject. It's an area which they have a great deal more knowledge than most, but may I just offer thanks to all those involved in this great service. The housing team. There are areas where this council demonstrates excellence in service, and the housing team are regularly recognised for their efforts, and any plaudits are richly deserved. The digital parking pilot scheme, well, we shall look forward to an update on the success of that pilot scheme here in Thanet. The Thames Gateway Strategic Group meeting. It will be interesting to see when, in fact, the government does come up with a realistic assessment of current and future housing needs, jobs and economic growth. But may I ask you to use all your influence to ensure that whatever they do, can they please not involve Mark Carney in their predictions? Thanet Parkway. In my personal view, Leader, for Thanet to prosper, Thanet Parkway must be a part of the bigger picture for our future development and growth strategy. Not in your report, Leader. Thanet Independent Councillors would like to wish every Thanet resident a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We would have liked to include the word prosperous, however, that word seems to have become somewhat redundant, possibly replaced by austerity. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But could I just ask, Mr. Chairman, I didn't actually get an answer to my earlier question whether we are now free to correspond with Mr. Coombs.
That wasn't an appropriate question, and I can't answer it. Leader, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I didn't think that was too political, Councillor Piper, and I think most of your comments I would echo. It was remiss of me, actually, not to wish everybody, members, officers, residents of Thanet alike, a very Merry Christmas. And I think I do that to almost everybody in Thanet. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Matterface, would you like to respond?
I'm hoping I'm one of the ones going to be wished a Merry Christmas. As the last person to respond to the Leader's report, I assumed others would pick up on some of the issues already, and indeed they have. So I want to highlight the amazing work done by our RISE team, their officers, the housing officers, the Salvation Army, and the many volunteers in supporting the winter shelter. As Councillor Piper mentioned, obviously I have some experience there. We shouldn't also forget the work done by many councillors in preventing residents from becoming homeless, because we're able to liaise with agencies and officers, and I actually spent Tuesday morning trying my very best to deal with a housing association and getting very little support, but thanks to some officers here, that situation has been dealt with. I would like to ask, however, how many empty properties are currently known. I know you've referenced them, but how many are currently known to TDC, and how many could be used even temporarily to house families rather than be sent out of area? As we know, many do get sent well away, which causes problems with employment and obviously with schooling. What more could be done to bring them back into use? That's a question I will address, which I assume Councillor Game will be able to deal with. Having already been able to do some sessions at the winter shelter because it opened earlier, I would like to draw everyone's attention to the four main issues as I see them. Firstly, the lack of affordable housing, mainly one-bedroom flats. We need to get building more suitable properties, and we definitely need at some point a hostel that is open all year, staffed with experts to help rough sleepers keep off the streets. Secondly, the constant rise in rents, not matched by rising wages. We need our economy to grow much faster locally with sustainable employment. The port's already been mentioned several times, so I would like to ask Councillor Bayford, how are you going to guarantee secure local employment for people if and when the port is actually back open full-time? Thirdly, the lack of mental health and rehab facilities needed to help those locally rather than be sent miles away from family and friends. My observation last evening at St Luke's in Ramsgate was, out of the 12 rough sleepers housed there, far too many had serious mental health issues, and we didn't have last evening, as we did have 2 years ago, a psychiatric nurse available for them to talk to. We had to call the police in the end because there was a situation that could have got out of hand. Fourthly, and from my own perspective, and I know many of my colleagues, the impact universal credit has had on those whose housing benefit is delayed. Sometimes it's delayed by months. And in fact, I met one gentleman in the in the winter shelter who had been evicted due to a 2.5-month delay on housing benefit. We need to put pressure, in my opinion, and my colleagues would agree, on the government to remove housing benefit from being one of the 6 benefits rolled into universal credit. All of those and some individual situations mean that this evening across Cecil Square in the Baptist Church Hall, 20 homeless people, both men and women of all ages, are settling down for the night, and I consider this is unacceptable.
Councillor Matterface, I don't believe that was covered by the leader's report, but I mean, worthy as it is, I think if you can sum up, we've had questions and I'll see if the leader or the portfolio holder can respond in any way, but if you can sum up, please.
To be fair, Chair, he did mention that the Thanet Winter Shelter, and I'm referencing my experiences from volunteering at the Winter Shelter, and I could consider they were valid points. But finally, I would like to ask Councillor Bayford if we could have an update on the East Kent housing situation. As I'm aware, some issues were raised last week at the Housing Coffee Evening. Perhaps you could arrange that, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Matterface, and can I personally thank those councillors that are involved with the rough sleeping exercise currently. Thank you. Councillor Bayford.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, you asked a lot of questions there, and I don't have the answers to those. I'll come back to you. And yeah, that would be brilliant, yeah. And well done for sneaking a lot of political comments past our Chairman this evening.
Thank you. Agenda item 11 is a report of the Chairman of the Executive Policy and Community Safety Scrutiny Panel. I call upon Councillor Glenn Coleman-Cook to present his report. Councillor Coleman-Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Executive Scrutiny Panel met on the 13th of November to review its work programme, which included consideration of the report on crime statistics in Thanet, which was presented by Kent Police. They spoke about the initiatives they've taken, working in collaboration with other agencies to reduce crime, particularly with regards to antisocial behaviour in the district. The panel was also consulted on the housing allocations policy as part of the public consultation on the new proposals. Although members acknowledged that the proposals looked appropriate, they recommended that the key worker list should include care support workers, which will be considered by Cabinet on the 15th of January. The panel also included an individual Cabinet member call-in on digital parking pilot project. Members felt that the information provided in the report accompanying the decision could have been more detailed. The leader of the council, standing in for the portfolio holder, acknowledged this point and indicated that the issue had since been resolved, as the portfolio holder was given a briefing by officers. During discussion, additional information was also provided to the panel, and thereafter no further action was taken. Members further reviewed the Food Law Service Plan and Enforcement Policy Report. While recommending the policy for adoption by Council, the panel also proposed that the Cabinet should identify funding for staff training and additional staffing in order to effectively deliver the highly needed statutory service. And this item is reported on under Agenda Item 14. I'd like to invite members to comment on and note the report. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson and Councillor Constantine.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Coleman-Cook. It's 4.1 about the museum's report, and it's something I've asked about before. The £50,000 left by Joyce, lovely lady, to the Dickens House Museum. Have you had a response from Cabinet on an up-to-date situation there? Because this money, I think, was bequeathed in about 2014-2015. And under 4.1 you're asking whether it could be used for the maintenance of the museum, and the other question was whether TDC had the right to dispose of the building. Did you get an answer from Cabinet? Thank you.
Councillor Coleman-Cook.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson, I don't believe we have any response yet, but I will look into that and get back to you.
Councillor Constantine.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your report. I have a couple of questions which you may or may not be able to help me with, but I think they're important to raise in the chamber. One is to do with the crime statistics on rape and sexual assault. Some while ago, Thanet was described as the sex crimes capital of Kent. The reason it's described as such is because 3.5, the rate for offence in this part of the world is 3.58 per 1,000 of head of population, compared to the national average of 2.53, which is the national average per head of 1,000. So I wanted to know if any action's been taken on that in that particular area. What are we doing about that? Are there any plans? Is it on anybody's agenda? And then my other point was, and I appreciate you may not have the answers, we continue to be an outlier in terms of domestic violence against women, and I wondered what steps were being taken, because again we're outside of the national average, and I just wondered if this was something you could give me some feedback on. Thank you.
Are you able to respond, Councillor Coleman? I don't think that was relevant to the report you presented, but if you can take on board the comments and perhaps consider them, if they're not in the report this evening, you can consider them with your committee at a future meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, members. Agenda item 12, report of the Chairman of the Finance, Budget and Performance Scrutiny Panel. I call upon Councillor Linda Piper.
Thank you, Chair. The panel has met twice since for the full council meeting in October. One of the key items on the agenda for the 23rd of October panel meeting was the presentation on the performance of the Ramsgate Port and Harbour by the Leader of the Council. A number of questions were forwarded to the Leader of the Council as part of the preparation for the meeting, and these were responded to as part of the presentation by the Leader. Members had the opportunity to ask additional supplementary questions during the discussion, and these were individually responded to by the Leader. It was further agreed that the Port and Harbour topic would be added to items for a future members' briefing session. The panel also considered proposals for the 2019/20 council fees and charges at the meeting on the 20th of November and forwarded the recommendations to Cabinet as detailed in my report. These proposals were considered by Cabinet today and were to be brought before this council meeting. I would like to invite members to comment and thereafter note the report. Additionally, I'd like to thank Mr. Nick Hughes and Mr. Charles Hunway for all the administrative work they do on behalf of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Piper. Agenda item 13, 2019-20 fees and charges. I would advise that in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 17.6, I will call for a recorded vote on the motion or any amendments and substantive motions. I call upon Councillor Gregory.
Thank you, Chair. The proposed fees and charges were considered and approved by Cabinet on the 15th of November and followed by the Finance, Budget and Performance Scrutiny Panel on the 20th of November. The Scrutiny Panel made 4 recommendations to Cabinet, and at an extraordinary meeting this afternoon, Cabinet considered those 4 recommendations, and I'm reporting on that now verbally because obviously there hasn't been time for it to be printed up. And taking them in turn, the first recommendation was to consider removing the fee for cremation services of children, and it says in the report under the age of 7 years. However, we don't have a fee for children under 7 years. We have a fee for up to 12 years and a fee for 12 to 17 years. So we consider that was probably an error, and it probably was misheard in reporting that. So we have actually, the Cabinet's considered this, and we've decided that we will actually increase the age for free cremations, if I can put it that way, up to 17 years of age. So no young persons under the age of 17 years of age will pay anything in Thanet for cremations now, which we think will be well liked by people in unfortunate circumstances. The second recommendation was to review the cost for cremation services for all age groups, having considered similar charges in other districts. Officers have undertaken a benchmarking exercise and have told us that we are competitive with other crematoria in the area, in the area of Kent. And I have to say that at the scrutiny panel meeting, a good piece of work done by the Councillor Reverend Piper was to provide us with some figures and passed out to the committee members on other crematoria in the area. And I'll tell you what they were. It was Vintners crematoria is £807 from the age of 15. Bluebell Hill was £840 from the age of 16. TDC will be £876 now from the age of 17. Barham was £895 from the age 16, and Hawkins was £999 from age 17. Now, the last two do actually include some optional, what we consider are optional extras, such as music and the collection and distribution of ashes. So you can see from that, though, thank you very much, Councillor Piper, that we sit quite well within the comparison with the other crematoria in Kent. So Cabinet decided not to do anything as far as that, no change to that, to the fees there. The third recommendation was to review the licensing fee changes in order to determine whether it was appropriate that no increases in licensing fees were proposed for this year. Officers again reported back to us and said that you know, these are obviously regulated charges. We are not allowed to charge more than the service costs us to provide, and comparisons have been made and found that in fact there is no justification in increasing the charges this year because it's not costing the council anymore to provide that service. So no changes there. And the fourth recommendation was to consider whether it was appropriate to set up an all-party cabinet advisory group to look at future fees and charges, and we think that's a great idea because, you know, there are lots of questions to be asked about parking and various other things in fees and charges, and it gets to this time of the year and really it's all been presented to us, and we would like to have more involvement in asking those questions earlier on. So yes, we would like to set up for the next year a cabinet advisory group to look at future fees and charges. They are the four recommendations, so I would like to propose that Council approves the fees and charges for 2019, including the two recommendations accepted by Cabinet. Seconder.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Bayford. Councillor Constantine was first, then Councillor Johnson.
Didn't need to say that.
Thank you very much, Chair. You may recall. Is it on? Thank you. You may recall in December 2016, a motion was put to central government to find a fund for £10 million to fund the deaths of children, and that motion fell. You may recall, I think we brought that to this chamber to say, was there something that Thanet District Council could do? I'm very glad that we can, relieve parents and carers of the burden of paying for a cremation at that time. I do wonder if we could go further. I do wonder if we could go further, and I wonder if we could fund other types of funerals for children.
I think that's one of the reasons we're looking to have a working party to look at all aspects and see how far we can go within our budget requirements. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Gregory. My concern is the increase of 20% on the coach parking. Tourism is obviously a major industry for us here, and it's always been a difficult one. We did have a coach park in Cliftonville that we got funding for and which we subsidised ourselves, but this is going to be a massive increase. People who come on holiday here by coach, by coach always have a problem financially at the best of times, and knowing from my stint as chair of British Destinations, it was often an issue that coach companies raised with us. It looks from the paperwork here on page 49 that it is an increase of 20%. Did you discuss all of this with hoteliers and other traders in the industry?
Councillor Gregory, are you able to respond?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Johnson. No, I don't know the answer to that, whether it's been discussed with hoteliers in the area. I would imagine that as with most of our parking fees, that they have been benchmarked with other areas, and that's the reason why it's been put up to that. But I'll certainly find out and give you a fuller explanation.
Thank you. Councillor Constantine, you've had one bite of the cherry. Are there any other councillors wish to make comment before I go to the recorded vote? Councillor Linda Piper.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to thank Councillor Gregory and his team and the Cabinet for considering our recommendations and acting positively towards them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll now instruct the monitoring officer to conduct the recorded vote.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Ashby. Councillor Bayford. Councillor Brim. Councillor Buckley. Councillor Campbell. Councillor Glenn Coleman-Cook. Councillor Keith Coleman-Cook. Councillor Constantine. Councillor Crowe-Brown. Councillor Dawson. Councillor Day. Councillor Della. Councillor Dexter. Councillor Edwards. Councillor Jeremy Fairbrass. Councillor Lynn Fairbrass. Councillor Falcon. Councillor Fenner. Councillor Game. Councillor Gregory. Councillor Grove. Councillor Hayton. Not here. No. Councillor Hillman. Councillor J. Jones. Councillor Johnston. Councillor Larkins. Councillor Martin. Councillor Matterface. Councillor Parsons. Councillor Linda Piper. Councillor Reverend Stuart Piper. Councillor Linda Potts. Councillor Roy Potts. Not here. Councillor Pugh. Councillor Rogers. Councillor Rozecki. Councillor David Saunders.
4.
Councillor Maeve Saunders. Councillor Savage. Councillor Summer Smirching. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Taylor Smith. Councillor Tomlinson. Councillor Townend. Councillor Wright. Thank you.
Thank you. That's carried. Agenda item 14, Food Law Service Plan and Enforcement Policy 2018 to 2020. I call upon Councillor Game.
Okay. The Food Standards Agency required local authorities to produce a plan that outlines how we provide our food safety service. This food law enforcement plan and policy sets out how the Public Protection Team will prioritise and manage their work for the next 24 months, taking into account the unknown elements of Brexit and the Food Standards Agency reform known as Regulating Our Future. The impacts on service delivery from these two things are unknown, and this is reflected in this document, which is why it is a hefty but necessary read. I hope you've all read it. It's the annex attached to agenda number 14. The Public Protection Team have been keeping track of these changes and continue to do so, adjusting service delivery where necessary. They have also, along with the Kent Food Group, made representations about the likely impact of proposals on small local businesses. The plan also takes into account the functions that the team currently perform by carrying out programmed inspections of 1,359 food premises according to the Food Law Code of Practice, as well as health and safety duties, whelk traceability events work, routine sampling, street auditing, complaints, caravan parks and infectious disease work. The plan has been presented to the Executive Scrutiny Panel and Cabinet, where members were supportive of the work the team undertake. I would therefore like to propose that Council approve the Food Law Service Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Game. Do I have a seconder? Councillor.
Seconded, Chairman.
Thank you. Do members agree? Thank you. Agenda item 15, changes to committees, panels and boards 2018-19. Would members please refer to supplementary agenda number 1, proportionality. I call upon the leader to make a proposal in respect of the options as outlined in the report. Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chairman. In fact, it's just the Labour group this affecting. I believe option 1 was your... No? Number 2, okay. I propose option 2 then, Chairman.
Does any member wish to propose an alternative option? In that case, do members agree? Thank you. Nomination to members to serve on committees. Group leaders may wish to take this opportunity to advise of changes to their nominations to committees, panels and boards for the remainder of the 2018-19 period. Councillor Bayford, do you wish to advise of any nomination changes?
No, thanks, Chairman.
Councillor Fairbrass? Councillor Campbell?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, just to, a couple of meetings ago, I did suggest that members of external committees could use the facilities of the Loop magazine to actually report back from those committees to members to inform them what... It doesn't seem that anybody has actually taken up that particular wonderful suggestion, I thought. However, those... You don't think it was wonderful? I thought it was wonderful. Anyway, by the by, yeah, I just hope to jog and remind those who are on these external committees, we don't want you to bring voluminous reports to this particular council, but we would like you to include them in the loop that goes round to members so that information could be gathered from those external committees. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Reverend Piper, do you wish to make any changes to nominations?
No, Chairman, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, members. That now concludes the business of the meeting this evening. Oh, sorry, Councillor Matterface, sorry.
As we're losing the seat on the Boundary Electoral Working Party, obviously that doesn't. We've lost that seat, so I'm not making any changes to any of the others. They are as they were before.
Thank you very much.
I needed to get a chance to say it.
Thank you. Can I just say that we've now concluded the business? I will let Councillor Johnson speak, but for those members that are not joining us on the first floor, can I wish members happy Christmas and a particularly healthy New Year? Councillor Johnson, quickly.
Chairman, I'd like to wish you a very happy Christmas and a very prosperous New Year, hopefully. And I'd also like to thank you this evening because I didn't have to wave frantically, I didn't have to get upset, and actually I noticed that you did actually pay considerable attention to us women this evening. It was a refreshing change. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Those who know me know that I know my place.